Welcome to the Runaway's Guide to Rosetta Prerelease. We are excited to bring you another guide based off of some of the things that we learned at the world premiere to help you do well at your next Rosetta Sealed event. We're going to start with a breakdown of the set mechanics and how to sort through your sealed pool, and then delve into how to decide between each hero. Rosetta is the first all-arcane set, where all of the heroes can do some amount of arcane damage. All of the heroes share a class with one other hero, and an element with a different hero. Pairing elemental powers with class abilities is the core gameplay in Rosetta. Let's take a look at what the unique mechanics are. Earth is the element of big attacks and life gain. You'll be throwing 3 for 7s, sometimes 8s, at your opponent while also gaining life to prevent dying to arcane damage. When you've accumulated some Earth cards in your graveyard, you can reuse those cards as additional resources to fund Decompose, a new mechanic that allows you to banish Earth and action cards out of the graveyard to boost the powers of cards that have the Decompose keyword. Once you've banished 4 or more Earth cards, some Earth cards and the heroes themselves gain a permanent boost to their power to level up and help you win the war of attrition. Lightning is the element of speed and utility. You will often be trying to string together combinations of attacks that have Go Again, while also using support cards to benefit your other attacks by giving them Go Again, or allowing them to be reused on attack and defense. Runeblade is a class that mixes a combination of attacks with non-attacks to set themselves up with buffs or arcane damage. Their primary mechanic that's shared by both Runeblades in this set is the creation of rune chants, auras that will destroy themselves upon playing or activating an attack to present arcane damage. Good Runeblade players will leverage creating rune chants with defense and setting up larger turns, boosting cards that care about auras or arcane damage. Wizard is a unique class in Flesh and Blood, as they are the only class that doesn't use attacks as their primary way of doing damage. Wizards cast spells with their non-attack actions that do arcane damage, and these spells often have benefits if you boost them with amp or other effects. Wizards are hard to defend against, but often need to create combinations of cards to augment their normally below rate damage. In addition, successful wizards are masters of the stack, and knowing how priority works in this game is key. So for example, amp boosts the next instance of arcane damage as a replacement effect, so if you throw an amp or a second source of arcane damage at instant speed, you can catch your opponent unawares. To deal with arcane damage, each hero will also start with a macro, the Sanctuary of Area. This card allows you to spend 2 resources as many times as you can in a single turn to prevent 1 damage every time you activate it, from a source of your choice. Here are some common ways that you want to be using your macro. Number 1, on the first turn of the game, when your opponent is threatening arcane damage, it's often worth it to block when possible. If the opponent is only threatening to do some serious damage, Number 1, on the first turn of the game, when your opponent is threatening arcane damage, it's often worth to block when possible. If the opponent is only threatening 1 or 2 points of damage, sometimes it can be worthwhile to save your macro for later. But if they're threatening to do some serious damage, it's often best to just use the macro to prevent as much damage as you can. Number 2, to prevent arcane damage effects. Many cards in the set will check if you've taken arcane damage during the turn, or if a spell is doing more arcane damage than the base. And for the most part, it's difficult for heroes to put together more than 1 to 2 arcane damage that will satisfy this condition. And sometimes overeager opponents will make plays that rely on doing 1 arcane damage, and you can prevent that by pitching 2 resources. Number 3, as a source of block value. Some matchups in Rosetta can go to fatigue, and in the endgame grind, the most important resource could be cards in your deck. And so it could be worthwhile in these instances to pitch your remaining cards to Sanctuary of Area in order to generate 3 to 4 points of block value, essentially creating 1 to 2 cards worth of block in the fatigue race. Now that we have an idea of all of the elements at play in Rosetta, let's take a look at some of the key cards for each type. In Earth, the first thing that you want to have is big attacks. Earth contains the highest density of attacks with more than 6 power, and so your opponents run the risk of fatiguing if they play too much defense against you. In addition, you want to look for Decompose cards to help your character level up. Most Earth decks get a significant power bonus once they hit 4 Earth cards and banish, so having more ways to decompose is beneficial. Cadaverous Tilling stands out, as all of the colors will want to attack for a good rate while also advancing your primary game plan. I would say that a good number of Decompose cards to have, on average, is at least 3 to 4. In addition to this, you want to look for some life gain cards in order to fill your graveyard and deny your opponent the ability to block, and put their cards into the graveyard for value. Sometimes with enough life gain, you can even put yourself out of reach for wizard decks to deal the finishing blow. Fruits of the Forest and Harvest Season are examples of excellent cards to slot into your Earth decks to prolong the game until you can decompose twice. Fruits of the Forest also does double duty as a big attack that you can swing at your opponent. In Lightning, Go Again is the most important keyword, as both Lightning heroes gain benefit off of playing cards in conjunction with Lightning cards on the same turn. Many of the Lightning attacks have a way to get Go Again, but in particular the ones that you want to look for are the ones that can start combat chains on their own, such as Fry, Flittering Charge, and Lightning Surge. In addition, you're looking for some additional utility from cards, such as Electromagnetic Somersault, which can flexibly be used to replay one attack or exchange for 2 blocking attacks. Rate is important for Lightning, and so the pools will be more difficult to succeed with on average. If you do, however, open a pool with many red Lightning cards, it can certainly be very potent. For Runeblade, the most important group of cards that you want to focus on are Rune Chant Makers and Go Again attacks. Rune Chant Makers such as Arcane Cussing and Malefic Incantation double duty as sources of evasive damage, while also setting up bigger turns with cards that care about arcane damage or auras. Sometimes an entire game can be decided based on a timely arcane cussing. Wizards are looking to stack some arcane damage against their opponents, and since arcane damage spells normally do a bit less damage than attacks, you definitely want to make sure that you have a good number of red arcane damage spells. Many of the wizard spells also have surge effects, which grant additional benefits when they're amped, and Hold Focus is a great source of amp that you can use to push through a key effect after your opponent has used their macro. Fatigue is also a concern against life gain decks, so having a way to recur some arcane damage is an important way to close games out. Now that you're caught up, Lucas will give you a rundown of the individual heroes.
Thanks, Yuanji. We're going to go over some of the common play patterns and powerful cards for each hero so that you know which hero to select based off of your sealed pool. Florian's hero power lets you make an additional copy of Aura tokens when you have 4 more Earth cards in your banish zone. This is a huge power boost for him, so you want to look out for as many decomposed cards as possible. You want at least 3 to 4 good decomposed cards, and then some ways to capitalize off of his hero power turning on. While you're trying to get there, you want to be blocking and trying to take advantage of his weapon as a source of efficient damage. A common game plan for Florian is to fill your graveyard with Earth cards at the beginning of the game by blocking with or playing them, saving your decomposed cards to play them for value, and then ending the game with your payoffs. Sometimes you will need to pitch red cards such as Strength of 4 Seasons or Arcane Seeds in order for them to generate you more value when you see them again in second cycle. This is going to be a common theme for all of the heroes, but almost all of the meld cards in Rosetta are pretty much busted and limited, so if you open any one of those, it's a pretty good idea to go into that hero. In addition, the Majestics he can play are also very strong, such as Germinate or Felling of the Crown. These cards all generate crazy value when you play them, so if you're lucky to open up 1 or 2 of these, it's a good idea to try to go Florian. Verdance also gets a power-up when she gets to 4 Earth cards in Banish, but instead she deals 1 arcane damage whenever you gain life. This means that some cards such as Blossoming Decay or Fertile Ground can also help finish the game when you get to the endgame. She shares a similar game plan with Florian, where you want to try to fill your graveyard with a couple of Earth cards at the beginning of the game and decompose them. Where she differs is that she doesn't have another pool of attacks to choose from. It's important to try to have as many big attacks in your Earth pool to help you get through the early and mid-game when you're playing Verdance. Her weapon, Staff of Verdant Shoots, is also a great tool to punish opponents who draw an awkward hand, as it allows you to amp 1 and create an embodiment of Earth token when you do any arcane damage. Wizards actually do a great job of blocking in this set, and Embodiment of Earth converts many of her cards to 4 blocks, which are amazing against people trying to throw big attacks at you or go wide. Many of the turns as Verdance will be blocking as much damage as you can and then throwing an arcane damage spell back at them. You run the risk of fatiguing, so it's important that you have some ways to ensure that you can close the game out. Perennial Aether Bloom is the best way that you can guarantee having enough arcane damage to finish your opponents off. But having a Save the Thought can also be clutch just to get an extra spell or 2 back in your deck to deal the last couple points of arcane damage. All of Verdance's rares are strong. Heartbeat of Spring in particular is a blue that you can pitch, which will function as a late game 6 health points swing with Go Again. Channel the Millennium Tree is also a great way for Verdance to ensure that she gets her surge effects off for multiple turns. Aurora, our next hero, is a tricky deck to build and sealed, but when it all comes together, she can be one of the strongest heroes in Limited. Her hero power allows you to create an Embodiment of Lightning token by paying 2 resources if you've played a lightning card this turn. But you want to be careful not to use this ability too many times, as it is really meant to act as a setup for your bigger turns. Her weapon, Starfall, is very strong if you satisfy the condition as a source of additional damage, and so you want to look for as many lightning attacks with Go Again as you can, preferably in red or yellow. When you do create embodiments of lightning, you want to pair that with powerful attacks without Go Again. Most of the Runeblade attacks without Go Again in Rosetta have very powerful effects, so stringing together those with additional attacks is a recipe for success. Even generic attacks are strong in Aurora when you can start the turn with an Embodiment of Lightning. Aurora has one of the most powerful rare split cards in Burn Up and Shock, where the Shock can enable all of your Arcane Damage Matters cards in Runeblade and allow you to attack with your weapon, threatening an additional 4 damage. One timely turn with this card can be the difference between victory and defeat. Arc Lightning is also a very strong card, giving your next attack go again and threatening at least 3 arcane damage, including your weapon attack. In theme with the rest of the signpost cards for Aurora, Channel Lightning Valley allows you to leverage your weapon as a hit trigger and can be a source of value for 2 to 3 turns. Ocelot is one of the most unique hero designs in Flesh and Blood, and his hero ability simply lets you swap instants for additional cards. This can be used to accelerate your pitch stack, but can also enable you to play some more situational instants such as Brush Off or Arcane Polarity, and discard them if the timing isn't right. His main source of power is Volzar, the Lightning Rod, which allows him to amp X equal to the number of lightning cards that he's played that turn, and is also discounted by 1 resource if you have a Sigil Aura in play. As a result, lightning cards which are instants or have go again are extremely powerful as turn starters, and it can be possible to get your weapon up to 3 and 4 amp realistically with some creative setup. His best damage spell is going to be Etchings of Arcana, which lets you reuse sigils again and again to set up big turns. In addition, you can use Flash in conjunction with cards like Open the Floodgates or Eternal Inferno to output a very high amount of arcane damage out of nowhere. Again, Ocelot's meld card is incredibly strong. Ocelot can always use Volzar in response to Shock to generate 2 arcane damage on your opponent's turn, which none of the other heroes can do easily. In addition to this, his Sigil of Brilliance double duties as a lightning instant as well as a sigil to allow you to put together massive turns buffing an arcane damage at the end. 0-cost arcane damage spells in general are some of the best ones to have in Ocelot, as he regularly wants to function off of very few resources. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully these tips will help you in your next events. Subscribe and stay tuned for more content to help you keep leveling up your Flesh and Blood game. Stay healthy and keep gaming.
We're getting rid of the envelope
7
here, but,
envelope
What we could do
in
here is go
darkness.
ahead and play the envelope.
All 3 pitches of Envelope and Darkness.